I'm Ivy.
I'm Rachel, and we are Swords and Sapphics, a podcast all about representation, queer media, women with a capital W, and a little bit of nonsense.
So start sharpening your swords, sip your tea, and join us as we obsess over the wonderful beings that are women.
Hello.
What are we talking about today?
Well, maybe it's less about what we're talking about and more about who we're talking to.
Again? You don't tell me stuff, honestly.
I just like to keep it a surprise.
Clearly, you're doing a good job of it.
Yeah.
So who are we talking with?
We are talking with Nadia El-Fassi, author of Best Hex Ever.
Oh my gosh, magic. It popped up behind me.
Oh my God, just like magic. You
Wowie.
summoned it. Which is funny because there's a point in the interview where Addie is summoned by the
Yeah,
words, you animals.
that's true.
Magic really does exist.
Yeah, it's true. It is what it is. And also today, because I'm on theme, I put my coffee into a pumpkin mug.
Oh, beautiful.
It took you a minute.
Took me a minute. I
Yeah.
was honestly, I was thinking about whether my hair looks greasy or just shiny.
Shiny.
I was I was thinking about it the whole time we was recording, and I
I
was
sometimes I glance at you and I thought like you were focusing so intently on something every now and then. So I thought it was the questions, but now no, it's the hair.
it's both.
Oh, okay. Wonderful.
But I do listen as well. I was
I
also
know.
focusing on Nadia's answers
Yeah.
because I love to listen
Yeah.
about, and she had a lot of interesting things to
She
say.
did. The book is so good.
It
We're reading
really
it
is.
right now. It's so good.
Yeah. Shall we talk about it now while we're
Yeah,
on the
let's do
subject?
it. Yeah.
Okay. So it's well, the main character is bi, first of all, and um Moroccan, and then the love interest is, I'm not sure
I'm not
what his
either.
roots are, but
I'm
he's brown and adopted by two women. And yeah, first of all, the cover is something in its own because I like the her bum looking respectfully, but like it's not often that you get that kind of body on the cover, not because she's got a big bum, but just because like it's just not the typical shape of an illustrated woman,
hmm
like a
So
very
it's not a
realistic.
stick.
Yeah, that.
Did you see the other cover? I don't know if it's like an American one. It's like purplish and it looks like a magic book. It's so
Ooh.
good.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
I
Oh yeah, it's
know.
very beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely love.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I would it's so rich. Like there are a lot of magic books out there and a lot of romances out there, but this one is like steeped in those little like beautiful feelings that you kind of forget to appreciate sometimes. Like
Yeah.
she puts feelings of like being carried to your bed by your parents and things like that into her baking, and
Yeah.
that's really special.
Yeah.
And obviously there's also the background of like Moroccan culture, and because I was saying a lot of the witchy stuff I read is just like white women being
Mm,
witches, and you kind of forget that there's lots of different cultures out there, and
yeah.
it's really nice to have something a little bit more dense and
Mhm.
richer in that respect.
Yeah. It's very fun. I have like 70 pages left and I'm just so excited to get back to it and finish it today.
Yeah, it's perfect for autumn. I
Yeah.
can't wait to read more of it. I
Yeah.
kind of want to make it last to
I know.
like like have a little nibble of it every now and again because it's so autumny and beautiful.
I was thinking the same way, especially because today it's 30 degrees, tomorrow it's supposed to be under 20. So I was like, one more day, but then again, like I have to work. So no,
Yeah.
no. Mm.
You can just pretend that it's autumn now.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing,
Yeah.
even though I'm sweating, but yay. Anyway, what else are you enjoying these days?
Oh my God, I've had a week.
Mm.
I started the week having no inclination. Well, I've wanted a gaming laptop for a while now, but I started the week like having no intention to buy one this week.
Mm.
Just in the future, it would be a future thing when I'm like rich and famous and stuff.
Mhm.
But then I don't know what happened. It just jumped into my I just the curries appeared on my laptop. It jumped into my basket, and now I've been playing The Last of Us a lot.
Magic, all about magic. What can
Yeah,
you do? What can
the
you do?
running theme of this
It's
episode.
true. But
Yeah. So
yeah.
that's what I've been doing. I've been back in my Last of Us feels. I mean, I've seen a lot of the scenes in the game already, because
Mm.
I went through a real Joel Miller phase. I'm still in it. Um,
Mm.
but playing it, it's so good. So good.
Beautiful.
Yeah, so good. I won't say it much because I know you won't let me.
Mm.
Which is hard, by the way.
No, it's not part of
But
me that I
whatever.
enjoy. Yeah.
I just love Joel Miller. I don't know if
Yeah,
you know this about.
I do. I mean, I felt it. Just an empath, I guess.
And Tess is even more hot and dominant in the game.
Mm.
Like she runs the show. Um, which
I
is
think I've
really
asked you that like several times, but is it the one that's narrated and then played by the woman I love from Station 19?
You mean Marlene?
Yeah.
No. Marlene is a firefly, which is like the rebellious
Oh, I thought an
type of
actual firefly. Don't have anyone.
No, she's
I was like, oh,
no, the only
okay.
creatures in sentient creatures in this game are the mushroom zombies.
Well,
Um, yeah. Marlene is a firefly and she doesn't come off favorably by the end.
wow. She's hot. That's her voice is
She's very hot.
sentence to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I've also been rewatching Lost
Mm.
a lot, a lot, a lot. Every time I rewatch it, it actually becomes more confusing to me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. One
I
would
don't
think
know.
the opposite by now.
Yeah, but
But no.
yeah, there's a there's polar bears on the island. So so it's never really gonna make complete sense.
Mm.
Um, but I just love it. I love it. I
Good.
realized I think I first watched it when I was like 10.
Mm.
I remember playing it in the playground. I was rolling down the hill of grass like, ah, the plane crashed. Made all my friends play it with me.
I was about to say that it might not have been the most appropriate show for you to watch, but then I remember what I've been watching and reading by that age, so I don't have any grounds to stand on here. Yeah.
Well, I had a nice balance with Doctor Who, which gave me plenty of trauma.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Um, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is pretty dangerous that I was in love with Sawyer at like 10 years old. But
Mm.
more importantly, I was in love with Kate, played
Mm.
by Evangeline Lilly. She's something
Fair.
else.
It's fair.
But
Mm.
now I'm watching it back and I'm really, really, really loving Dominic Monaghan's character Charlie. But I always loved him anyway, so that's nothing new. But
Mm.
I'm also really loving Harold Perrineau's character,
Mm.
Michael.
Mm.
He has a really great story because his girlfriend took full custody of um his son
Mhm.
when he was a baby and
Mm.
moved away. And because they weren't married, he hadn't like no rights. So by when they're on the plane crash, it's because they was traveling back from Sydney because is this really interesting? Do you care?
Yeah. I just have like
Okay.
a thing on my leg that I keep scratching at, but yes.
Just realized I'm rambling and like nobody cares. But but I care. Okay. So when he's back, the reason they're on the plane is they're all traveling back from Sydney. And he is on it with his son who he hasn't seen in 10 years, nearly 10 years, 9 years. Um, because his ex-girlfriend died where she was living in Sydney. So like he doesn't know his son, and like they don't have a relationship, but obviously like he's stuck on the island and he has to be a dad, and it's just really great. It's great dynamics.
Mm,
So interesting.
beautiful.
It is one of those shows where like every single character has a real purpose, and I think they
Mm,
do it really well.
good,
Yeah.
good.
But how about you?
I think I've been enjoying so many things these days. Uh, but I'm gonna talk about just a few because I want to talk about them a little more.
Mhm.
So one of them is Chaos, which is a new show on Netflix. It has Jeff Goldblum as Zeus. It's about Greek gods, clearly, in like a modern world, sort of, and all the like Greek myth characters. So you have Ariadne, you have Orpheus and Eurydice, you have the Minotaur, and like, my God, it's one of the best shows I've ever seen. I finished it, and the next day I started it again. I'm on the
Yeah.
last episode again, and I'm already like, might watch it soon and again.
And also my love is there, Billy Piper. You
Oh
forgot
yeah,
to
she
mention.
is. I recognized it immediately, even though she was like, n- I don't. She looked very different to me. But I recognized her. She plays Cassandra, the Oracle. It's so, so, so good. When you see Jeff Goldblum, you think, oh, so it's gonna be like funny, sarcastic character.
Mm.
Fuck no. It's Zeus as you know him in Greek myth. Zeus, my God, he terrified me. It got to a point where I was genuinely scared of him.
Oh no.
Yeah, there is um there's also a little different take about on Orpheus and Eurydice, but I enjoyed it nonetheless. It's heartbreaking also, but in a different way than it is in the myths. And there's also a character called Cyanus. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name correctly. He he was born as an Amazon as a girl, and he transitioned, and then he had to leave the tribe. And like, I went to look about the character on like Wikipedia and stuff. And in the myth, he's like canonically kind of a trans man because he was also born as a woman, and then he like changed into a man at some point, which is so exciting. I didn't know that.
Yeah. It's great. It's great when there's trans rep, and it's even greater
Yeah,
when they're played by trans
I know.
people.
And Dionysus is there, and he's my baby boy. My God, which is also very funny because I've been rewatching Percy Jackson recently, and Mr. D there is very different from this version of Dionysus.
Mm.
So it's just very it's so good. It's so good. I can't stress it enough. There are the fates. It's so queer. There's so much queerness, and just my God, it's so good. Medusa is there in the end of the world.
Mm.
You get Persephone and Hades, and they're so adorable. They're such an adorable sort of like oldish couple. You can feel sort of like the warmness of the love instead of like the lust and stuff that's usually in the retellings. I'm
Mm.
already so excited to finish it again.
I get it. I
I'm
need to
starting.
watch it then.
So good. And the music is phenomenal. I keep listening to the soundtrack.
Yeah. Musicals with and Greek myths are suddenly becoming like very intertwined. Like this is
Oh.
like the third or fourth media that you've consumed that is a mu Greek myth and a musical.
It's not. There's only one song, but like the soundtrack part, like just the instrumental musics are so good, and it really. It's only on Spotify. It's only 4 songs, but they can be like up to 12 minutes long, which is strong joy to me. But it's
Yeah.
so good, and it's done by a woman. I think Isabel Summers is her name. She's the
Mm.
composer for it. Yeah, but yeah, and I've been also listening to Epic Musical. So good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm
Yeah.
in my Greek myths era. So that's
And I
also
love
why
to
I'm
see it.
reading Pandora's Jar by Natalie Hayes, I think is the author. And it's about sort of the origin of few of the female characters and like different takes on them throughout the history. Like I read about Pandora and Yocasta now, and the writer is talking about like the original place and how like the takes are just different, and it's so fascinating
Hmm.
to also what we know now and what we like. Pandora's box is a normal phrase, but it might not have been a box at all and stuff like that. So it's so interesting. I'm so excited to get read on more.
Yeah.
And I've also watched a movie. Uh, it's A Man Called Otto with Tom Hanks. It's based on a book. And I didn't even tell you one thing. So it's about a man who lost his wife and he's trying to kill himself to be with her again. But he's very unsuccessful at it, which is kind of it's not funny, but it's like he's so bad at it. That's funny. He constantly keeps getting distracted by stuff or someone keeps knocking at his door. And he's sort of like very angry and mean and unfriendly. And then there is a family who moves in opposite his road, and they sort of like adopt him in a sense. And then he sort of like melts all the like all the anger that he felt after his wife passing and because of some stuff that happened to him and his wife in the life. And it's just so heartwarming. And there was a boy because his wife was a teacher. And when Otto was out in the street, there was a boy on a bike throwing like newspapers. And was like, what are you doing? Stuff like that. And the boy was like, oh, you're Mr. Anderson, right? Your wife was my teacher. She was the first one who didn't look at me weird because I was trans. And she was the first one who called me by my new name first.
Oh
I
my gosh.
know. And Otto was like, what's your name? And he was like, Mason. And he was like, okay, Mason, we're gonna and like it was like they also had this little relationship. So when this is a spoiler, like at some point Mason gets kicked out of his house by his dad. And he comes to Otto and he's like, okay, come in.
Oh man.
I know. And that was also like one of the ruin of like he tried to kill himself again and then Mason like knocked on his door. So
No.
it was so good. It was so good. It left me sobbing. Fucking
Okay.
phenomenal movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Billion out of 10. Can't recommend enough.
And Only Murders new season is out.
Yeah, it is.
I just finished um the last season, season 3.
It's true.
My only notes is that I need Mabel to just be with Theo.
I agree.
Is
I
she still
agree.
with Tobit in season 4?
No, not
Okay.
that I
But
know
she's
of.
gonna be with someone else instead.
It's possible.
They
I
keep giving her a new love interest every season. I'm kind of over it.
Yeah.
Unless it's a woman, in which case I guess we'll make room for it, but only if it's not Cara Delevingne.
Mm, it's true.
I have some requirements, and it's that.
Good thing it's not too specific.
Yeah. But it's great. It's such a great dynamic. It's really appealing to my father abandonment issues.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I want 2 old funny dads.
I know. And what's also funny is that now that I'm watching the fourth season, I'm sort of like noticing a little character traits that kind of like I see Rachel and Charles and me and Oliver a little bit. Like there was in the first episode, there was a scene where Oliver was on the ground just screaming dramatically. And then Charles came in and he was like, I hear a whistling sound in my ear. I might have I am dying on a brain tumor. And I was like, this is us on like a normal evening.
The same day, I told her that I was worried I've got getting a brain tumor because my eyes have been blurry.
Yeah. And wasn't it also the day where I was starting every sentence is also my issue is.
Yeah.
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 So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And once you
Oh,
start noticing it, you can't unsee it. So yeah.
no. It's
That's
great.
great.
Very funny.
So we need to, so technically, like you were talking about, like you need two men to adopt you. We need a woman to adopt.
That's true. I'm happy
Yeah.
to adopt Selena Gomez. Although maybe not because she's kind of annoying. But
Yeah.
somebody who looks like her, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anywho,
Anywho,
shall we get to the interview?
let's do it.
Wonderful.
Enjoy.
Well, thank you for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Nadia El-Fassi. I'm the author of Best Hex Ever, which is a cozy and spicy witchy fantasy romance. It's my debut. It's coming out this October. I think it's the 1st in the US and the 3rd of October in the UK. And yeah, I'm also a commissioning editor at Orbit Books. So my day job is commissioning and publishing science fiction, fantasy, and horror books.
Exciting. That's quite the reach from like fantasy and horror books to sort of like cozy romance.
I think a lot of the books that I've published at Orbit, like the Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies, and I think of another one that's quite similar, Tony's like Megan Bannon's Undertaking of Heart and Mercy. They're kind of in this sort of cozy fantasy space anyway. I mean, Heather Fawcett definitely is. So it's not too much of a jump, I guess. Like, I'm probably doing more fantasy rom-com with it being contemporary, whereas obviously they're doing like secondary world, so it's a touch different. But I think it's the same spectrum, just different sliding scale.
So you worked on Emily Wilde also.
Yeah, so I was very lucky to preempt the UK rights for that. So it's with Del Rey in the US and it's with us here in the UK. So
Exciting. So we have th you to thank for that also because we're a
Yeah,
huge fan of that series.
we
So
love that book.
yeah.
amazing. Yes, I actually got Heather's first draft of her new book in my inbox on Thursday morning,
Oh,
which is called Agnes Auber's Mystical Cat Shelter. And already I'm so excited. It's on my Kindle. I'm reading
Oh,
it now.
wonderful.
amazing.
That's
How
amazing.
much do we have to pay you?
Yeah. But let's talk about your book, Best Hex Ever. What inspired you to write the story?
Really, I think it was sort of early days pandemic, and me and my husband had moved out. I was born in London, grew up in London, and during the pandemic, we decided to finally move out to have some more space for our cat to have a good life, and for him to have like a big window to look out into a garden. And I think just moving to a small town, and I've always loved sort of small town romance and stuff, that was definitely one aspect of it. But I think needing something to get me through the pandemic that was sort of cozy and heartwarming and brought me joy, because I've always been writing and I'm sort of working on epic fantasies on the side, and that's something I'll come back to, and horror as well. But they weren't kind of sparking joy in the mid-pandemic. So I wanted to work on something that would just make me feel really happy. And I was doing a lot of baking as well. A lot of baking and things sort of inspired by my Moroccan heritage. So I'm half Moroccan on my mum's side, and I think baking sort of like old recipes that maybe they're things I saw my grandma doing, my mum doing sort of way back when, and now I'm sort of finding those recipes, or I'm sort of messaging my cousins on WhatsApp and I'm saying, hey, how do you make that soup again? I can't remember. And I think I wanted to sort of put all of that into a book. I just think, there is so much kind of cozy fantasy romance and there's so much contemporary romance, sort of like small town, but I didn't see loads of it that had the sort of North African representation, which I was sort of hoping I could bring to the table. But I also just want people to fall in love with Moroccan cooking as much as I love it. So that was really my agenda all along.
Oh, I love that. Um, did any places, real or fictional, influence the book's setting, aside from, of course, London?
Yeah, actually. So I live in St Albans, which is you guys might be familiar with it if you're UK based, but it's a sort of cathedral city where it doesn't really feel like a city. It's got a cathedral, which is why it's technically a city on paper, but it feels like a large town. It's very old, very medieval, lots of cobbled streets, lots of beautiful old buildings. So that was definitely a inspiration for Little Hathering, which is the small town where my main character Dina grew up, and was a big sort of inspiration for her. And also my sort of the small village that my dad lives in Buckinghamshire is called Stony Stratford, and that is also a huge inspiration. So right at the end of the book, I don't really think of this as a spoiler, so I'm going to go ahead and give it, but there is a turning on of the Christmas lights in the epilogue, and that is sort of verbatim an event that happens every year in Stony Stratford. There is a beautiful lantern parade where sort of children and ages like 8 to 12 are carrying their lanterns up and down the high street, but really it's their proud parents who have made these high spec lanterns themselves, who are looking very proud. And I wanted to kind of get across that feeling of sort of warm, festive merriment, I guess, that I experience every year going there.
Beautiful. Where did the creation of the magical system come from? Because, like, for example, the link to like between magic and the menstrual cycle, which feels extremely like new to me and exciting.
I feel like it maybe actually something that came more from the horror space, funnily enough. I think you see this sort of like monstrous feminine rage tied to like blood or vampirism and like monstrous beings, and it's often tied to like, you know, you have a werewolf that's tied to the moon, and like, you know, women's sort of nature is tied to the tides and the moon and all of that. And so it kind of was an easy step from there to sort of take it and say, okay, well, you know, the menstrual cycle is tied to magic. It makes complete sense. But I also read a book called A Spell for the Wild, or A Spell in the Wild, A Spell for the Wild, I think, by Dr. Alice Tarbuck, which was a huge influence in the book, really, sort of consciously and unconsciously, I think. It's a nonfiction book, sort of looks at per month, per season, a different sort of spells that a sort of burgeoning witch might be able to do, but also just ways to kind of tap into the nature and the sort of almanac around you, and how the seasons change, especially if, you know, like me, you've grown up in London where you have maybe a local common or a small park, but you don't really have wild, unbridled nature around you. You know, it was sort of like, okay, well, this is the season where the blackberries are going to be growing in the hedgerows. And by the way, did you know that your menstrual cycle is tied to the moon? You know, so you kind of hit you with these sort of quite monumental, sort of impressive reckonings for like, you know, the female body and the form and all of that. So I loved that. So that definitely was an influence in this. And also I think obviously like Women Who Run with the Wolves is like an all-time favorite of that. So I think, you know, the idea that the female body is sort of tied to nature has been around for centuries, and I'm, you know, I can take no credit for coming up with that idea. I'm just sort of, you know, I loved it and I wanted to. I think that's all we do with books, right? We love things that we've read elsewhere, that we've seen elsewhere, and then we collect them into little trinkets and then we put them on the paper. So that's all it is, really.
Beautiful.
And speaking of little trinkets, I was saying to Ivy last night how much I loved the way you put like feelings into the magic of like the cakes and the drinks and things. That was so special. Like, so how did you come up with that? Where did that come from?
You know, I'm not entirely sure. I don't think I have like a specific moment when I was like, oh yeah, this is how this magic system is going to work. I think, like I said, I really just wanted to do things that made me think about joyful, heartwarming things. And, you know, I remember sort of brainstorming with my husband, and I was saying, what are some really nice, lovely things? And he was like, what about when we kiss the cat on the head? And I was like, yeah, you're right. That is one of those great things. Or like, you know, when you put socks on a radiator in winter and then you put them on after a hot shower, you know. And so I think I just started almost thinking, well, what are those lovely things? And I did, funnily enough, I read this Tumblr post that was like, you know, at one point in your life as a child, you're picked up for the last time and carried inside by your parents after you fall asleep in the car. And I was like, it had sort of bittersweet nostalgia hit me with it. And I was thinking, God, if only there was a way to recreate that feeling as an adult, and how would you do that? And I think perhaps it came from there a bit as well.
It's gorgeous.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
So what drew you to the romance genre in particular, and how did you decide that you wanted to mix it with fantasy?
I grew up on fan fiction. I was very much like early days. You'd watch literally any movie or TV show you can think of, and then you go to the internet and you're like, this character plus this character romance, and then your parents are like, what are you doing? You're like, nothing, nothing, playing computer games, nothing at all. So I think, fan fiction was hugely formative for me as like a romance genre. I think fan fiction writers are some of the greatest romance writers in existence. Um, so that was definitely, from early days. But I also grew up on I was kind of a teenager during the heyday of dark fantasy romance. I'm talking Twilight, Fallen, Cassandra Clare, the whole works, kind of multi-book series long slow burn romances. I was the target audience and I fell for it head over heels. So I think I've always read fantasy romance. As a lot of time, I think I viewed it as a guilty pleasure, especially I did an English degree. Romance as genre is frowned upon by those of the literary fiction mindedness, unfortunately, and that's sort of more from an academia bent. And so I remember actually in sort of first and second year of university, I was working at Waterstones part-time, and I was doing the children's book selling, and I was doing the SFF section a lot. And Sarah J. Maas was in there, and I obviously read Sarah J. Maas by that point, and it was a real guilty pleasure. And so sometimes people would come in and they'd be like, have you read this? I was like, oh, no, I wouldn't. But now I'm like, oh yeah, I've read it. Of course I've read it. We've all read it. So I think a big part of wanting to write romance is getting back in touch with kind of like teenage me who wasn't ashamed or embarrassed to read a lot of it. And, I think I've always read a lot of romance. I've read a lot of Regency romance as well. And I think although I'm writing contemporary, I think I'm hugely inspired by a lot of Regency romance authors. I think I love, that's why all of my books, Best Hex Ever and all of the others I've been working on, they center around a grand countryside house, and there's a lot of dinner parties, and maybe there'll be a ball or something like that. And I just really love that attitude towards romance, which is a bit more romance of manners as well. And so Tessa Dare and Danielle Steele and all these authors like that were huge inspirations. But more recently, I read the Talia Hibbert books early in the pandemic, Get a Life, Chloe Brown, all of that. And they were just so formative as just really incredibly well done contemporary romance that sort of had the erotic side and had the beautiful, sensual, intimate scenes, but also didn't sort of fall short on the emotional growth of the characters, and they didn't sort of shy away from dealing with more difficult themes, but they were also really funny. And I think Talia Hibbert is my sort of end game. I think she's the most incredible writer. So if I get to emulate her in my writing, then that's good for me. That's probably where it came from.
Wonderful. So Scott is a museum curator and Dinah is a cafe owner. Did the book require any research surrounding these careers or outside of them?
No, it probably should have in some ways. No, I lied. It did. So I think, I'm a child of divorced parents. And so again, growing up in London, pretty much every other weekend when I was hanging out with my dad, we would hit the galleries, National Gallery, Portrait Gallery, V&A, British Museum, the works. And so I kind of, and they have so many free things for children to do and activities and stuff. So I was in museums and galleries constantly during my childhood. And so I think it almost didn't require research because I know them so well. I did a slew of work experience at the Horniman Museum as well, which is in South London. I would really recommend it if you guys ever go. It's a very peculiar sort of place where they've collected stuff, stolen from all around the world. They've got, torture chairs and an Iron Maiden and a fish, well, they've got a sort of monkey fish mermaid skeleton and all these cool things. And so I've always been fascinated by what are the strange things that museums have in their archives that maybe don't always get shown and aren't always kept in the gallery. So that's definitely always been there. And I've always just been super familiar with the British Museum from just having been there a lot. And I was, one of those Egyptology kids. I was super obsessed with ancient Egypt. So I was always there in the Egypt Gallery. And way back when they still allowed the library, sort of domed library in the centre to be open up to the public as well. That just loved being in there. It was a very sort of Beauty and the Beast moment in that library. And for Dina, really, I think it's just just all the baking that I do, you know, for my friends, for my family, work colleagues. I'm not as familiar with bread and pastry, so we did do one of the bread ahead courses, quite sort of like end of the pandemic, sort of like 2022, where I learned how to make croissants and stuff, and they are really tricky. And I was like, I'm going to put that in the book because, like, there's such an effortless thing, and they're so delicious, and I always think I love to make these, and then you make them and you're like, well, I'm never doing that again because it was so complicated. And yeah, you just have to be such a sort of professional to do it. So I guess Dina's bakery and all of that is very aspirational for me. Like, I would love to be that talented of a baker, but what I lack in sort of professional talent, I make up for in enthusiasm.
Mm.
And you draw a lot to kind of less Western, I guess, like witch talismans and things like that, things you wouldn't usually find in like Western books or like books featuring like white characters. So did you take anything from like the Moroccan side of, you know, like witchery and magic?
Yeah, definitely. I think the sort of the Hamsa, or like, which is like the Hand of Fatima, or the Evil Eye, which is, they're kind of connected, they're sort of one and the same. Both sort of symbols of protection, is something I pretty much always grew up with. I was always told to wear one on me. Like, so if I was, you know, I did stage school growing up, if I was doing a play, somewhere on me, I'd have like a Hamsa necklace sort of tucked under my t-shirt or something. Over in our bedroom, I have a Hamsa hanging above our bed. I have one hanging above my front door. You know, it's one of those ones where I think Moroccan culture, obviously it's an Islamic country, but it also has its indigenous roots. And my family comes from the Amazigh, which is a indigenous tribe, sort of pre-Islamic indigenous tribe, from sort of northern and western Morocco, but really actually the whole of Morocco. There's about 750 or so tribes of individual Amazigh people, and I try to bring in some elements of that, but also I think, you know, I'm not super familiar with them. The resources to kind of educate yourself on them are relatively sparse, and I think, you know, hidden behind lots of paywalls and such. And I think I almost wanted that to be a part of Dina's kind of issues, in a sense, is that she has this culture, but because she's grown up in the UK as I did, she's sort of an outsider to her own culture. So I wanted to kind of have these sort of magical amulets and stuff and say, look, these are beautiful, but you don't really understand them actually. So that was something that was really important to me to put in. But yes, the Hamsa is very much like a sort of, I don't think there's one Middle Eastern or Islamic country that doesn't have it in some respect. I think, you know, you go to Turkey, they've got it there. You know, I'm sure it's in like Dubai. I know they have it in Egypt. So it's pretty much everywhere. I mean, I'm even wearing a ring with it right now. Like, it's, you know, have it on you at all times because you never know when the evil eye will strike. But the Moroccan people are a superstitious people. So I think, you know, that was definitely an inspiration as well. A lot of the inspiration behind the characters in this book, especially Dina and her mother Noor, was definitely based on my relationship with my mother, who was, you know, God bless her, a very superstitious woman. So it was really fun to put that in.
And we have a listener question from our Discord server. Did you always intend to make the story Halloween themed? And if so, what drew you to the season?
Oh, I feel like, you know, when people talk about December and Christmas and they make that joke that Michael Bublé is thawing and he's like coming out of, like, he's being defrosted. That's how I feel in like end of August, early September. I feel like I'm coming into my power, you know, like I was made for fall. Like I'm a sweaty girl. I hate summer. Like I'm not, I want to, like, just let me freeze. Let me put like thick socks on and a cozy jumper and give me a hot chocolate and let me watch like Practical Magical Gilmore Girls and I'll be happy. So I think it was a kind of no-brainer for me for it to be set during autumn, fall, whatever you call it, because that's just my favorite time of year. I think also sort of thinking about in the witchy sense, obviously Halloween is very much a sort of important time. You have the thinning of the veil. There is a deleted scene in this book which I deleted for a purpose because book 2 has more of a focus on kind of ghosts and ghost whispering and stuff. But I did have a kind of ghost parade, and so, you know, like there is, and then we do still see some ghosts in this book as well. But I love the kind of idea of like magic is an ancient sort of beautiful thing, and it's easier to tap into around the time of like Halloween and Samhain and all of that. So yeah, I really wanted to put that in. And you know, pretty much every one of my books is set at Halloween or winter or Christmas. I struggle to sort of think about setting things during the summer. I start to do it and then I'm like, oh, but what if the leaves were browner, and what if it was a bit colder? And what if, you know, they had to hold hands to stay warm?
Absolutely
Yeah.
love it. And in the spirit of Halloween, what is your personal favorite Halloween tradition?
Oh my gosh. Um, I mean, I do really love just like pumpkins in the window, like just sort of like carving pumpkins to let people know that they can come around to your house to trick or treat. Where I grew up in South London, it was a very sort of trick or treat friendly kind of sort of neighborhood. And we used to do it a lot when I was a kid. And then sort of when I got to a sort of teenage age, we'd have the jack-o'-lanterns outside so that local sort of younger kids could come over and trick or treat. And then when I sort of moved, sort of still in London for like university and sort of early 20s, we were in sort of places where there were lots of other people similar age to us and no one was trick or treating again. And so when we moved out of London, I thought, oh my God, this is it. This is the time. And so, you know, we put little tiny sort of ghost pumpkins in our windows and stuff. That was so nice to get sort of trick or treaters again. So maybe that, but I do really love, you know, maybe this is the US influence, but I love making things with pumpkin as well. Like I love making pumpkin pie or like sort of like a cinnamon chai to drink as well. I think I drink iced coffees all year round, but then I really love like a mid-afternoon kind of autumnal chai. And you know, I don't know that it's necessarily spooky or Halloween tradition, probably more of just an autumn tradition.
Wonderful.
So you mentioned book 2, which sounds very exciting. Can you give us a hint about what might be next and any other upcoming projects?
Yeah. So book 2 is so if you've read book 1, you'll have met Rosemary, who is one of Dina's closest friends. She's a horror author. And book 2 is basically her book is being made into a movie. It's a kind of like I would say her book that's being adapted is a sort of Women in Black, kind of classic gothic ghost story with a small cast. And she is going to be one of the exec on-set sort of producers for it. And it is a romance between her and Ellis Finch, who is an A-list Hollywood heartthrob, who is cast as the main actor in the adaptation of her movie, except he's very like a sort of action hero, big blockbuster superhero movie kind of guy. And this is a gothic horror. Like she's like, I don't think he's right for this role. I'm not really sure about this. And so they're kind of butting heads on set. I wouldn't quite go so far to say it's enemies to lovers. I think enemies to lovers is a very tricky thing to pull off in a contemporary romance because I'm like, are you really enemies? Like, so I would say it goes as like disgruntled acquaintances to lovers, perhaps. Obviously, like huge heft of forced proximity, you know, bedroom next to each other, that sort of situation. We got more cute animals in this one. Oh my God, as I said, cute animals.
She was summoned.
She was waiting for her cue.
Amazing. She's like, did you call me? So yeah, lots of cute animals, a ton of spice. This one, I think this will be book 2 is definitely my spiciest book yet. It's more of a focus on a sort of dom sub relationship. I really wanted to write something like that in a sort of cozy contemporary romance space to, you know, I'm a big believer that romance books are a gateway for people to just discovering kinks about themselves, to be very transparent. I think that's very true. But also I think you know, this might be the first time someone comes to reading something about this topic. And I think that as a romance writer, you have a responsibility to do it well and show sort of all the ways in which good communication is really important in a sort of kink-based relationship. And so that was something really important to me to write in book 2. And also I think to just write a submissive in the bedroom, quote unquote, woman who is also like a very fleshed out main character. And it's, you know, her submissiveness in sort of intimate scenes does not negate from her sort of power outside of the bedroom, and I wanted that to be really clear. But also there's a ton of ghosts, and she's a ghost whisperer, and Rosemary can see ghosts, and there are all types of ghosts, animal and human, that we will get to interact with in book 2. And it made me cry at points, I won't lie. I think I was working through some like pet trauma in there, but in a sort of wholesome way, if I can say that. And book 3 is Sapphic, which I'm very excited about. It is called My Fairy Godlover, and it is essentially a sort of Cyrano de Bergerac retelling, if I would almost call it that, where you have our main character Annie is a museum archivist. I love a museum, and she is essentially hired to go and clear out this manor house of this very eccentric old lady who has passed away. Think kind of the house in Knives Out, that sort of vibe. Very like lots of weird, strange trinkets on the walls, that kind of thing. And when she's in there, she's sort of fantasizing about her boss, who she's in love with, who's a guy called Max. And as she's doing it, she's sort of like rubbing this old jar that then breaks, and out pops Essin, who is a fairy godmother, who is like, listen, I heard you. I'm here to help. I will help you win this man over. Except Essin hasn't really been in existence or out of her jar since the Tudor period. So her concepts of how someone woos another person is entirely based on sort of Tudor and like old-fashioned society forms of courtly romance. So there's a lot of like, you know, mismatched era, this is how you do a ballroom dance, but it's also, my kind of goal is to make this the sort of sexiest sapphic book I can possibly write. Like, I think there is a lot of incredible, beautiful sapphic fiction, sapphic romance out there. I am yet to sort of, in mainstream publication, see a done and time again, a very, very spicy sapphic erotica book that is kind of in the cozy space. So that's my plan. I think sort of cozy, spicy sapphics for book 3.
Oh,
Amazing.
I'm
I'll
so
be pre-ordering it as soon as it
Honestly.
goes up.
I think yeah, Love at First Fright is book 2. That'll be out October 2025 probably. And then My Fairy Godlover will probably be September, October 26.
Wonderful. So exciting. A little fun question. If you were a paranormal or magical being like Dina, what would you be?
Oh, gosh, I mean, probably a kind of witch, I guess I'd have to be. But the question is what? I think I sort of have like divination witches and kitchen witches in there. And as much as I do have an enthusiasm for cooking and baking, I don't think I would be one of those. I don't have a green thumb either. I guess maybe like a book witch. If that was the thing, I think I could have to be a book witch. You know, my day job is books. My house is full of books. I used to work in a bookstore. It would have to be books. I think, you know, maybe like having the magical ability to see a person and think this is the exact thing they need to read right now. That would be a pretty good ability to have.
It would be a great one. And if you had a sentient house like Dina's childhood home, how would you use it?
Oh my gosh, I feel like it would use me in the, you know, in the best sense. I feel like, you know, it's like one of the things, it's like you don't drive the car drives you. The sentient house owns you. But I think, you know, in terms of it would be autumn all year round. I think I would also really love to have a riad, which is a sort of house with a external courtyard in the center. Like it is in Best Hex Ever, my sort of family house in Morocco growing up, which we used to go sort of visit every single school holiday we had a riad in the center. And I just think that, you know, the internal courtyard is sort of like the soul of the house, I think, in many ways, especially in a place that's sort of like more Mediterranean. So I would really love to have that. And I also think I'd want to have like a sauna room, like a sort of Finnish sauna, and maybe a room that's like just for my cat. I don't know. I think he would have like a little climbing frame, a little cozy heating pad, like a little window with maybe like some bird trees outside so that he could sort of sit and watch the birds and make that little ek 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 noise that cats make when they see birds. Yeah, probably that. Probably and have a home gym as well in there somewhere, but like a sort of cool sentient home gym somehow.
Yeah.
I love you're really like in depth, and I was just like I wish I wouldn't have to like dust off my shelves. Like that's just the ideal scenario for me.
That goes without saying. I never have to clean again.
Yeah.
Mine would just be to not lose everything all the time.
Oh yeah.
That's a good
Yeah.
one.
It's
That's
like
a
that
good
one
one.
sock that you found from 4 years
Yeah.
ago suddenly miraculously reappears. Yeah.
And before we go, we always ask what people are enjoying at the moment. So is there any TV show, book, movie, podcast, anything that you'd like to gush about a little bit?
Oh my gosh. This is the one where I admit that like recently I've just been rewatching things that bring me comfort.
Same.
But I have been rewatching Gilmore Girls. Actually, my husband has never watched it, and I was like, we've been together for a decade, and I don't know how. I watch it every year, so where have you been? But we managed about sort of like 5 minutes into an episode, and he looked at me and he said, "You're just like Paris," and I was like, I'm going to take that as a compliment. I don't know that it's always a compliment, but fine. So I'm rewatching Gilmore Girls. I was reading recently The Ornithologist's Field Guide to Love by India Holton, which is a sort of Victorian romance of manners. It's very funny. Like there's a moment where they're doing the chapter ends and they're like, there's only one bed. And then they turn over the pages like, there were not one bed, there were 7 beds stacked on top of each other in a side room. And I think she's a very witty writer.
Yeah.
I'm also reading Little Thieves by Margaret Owen. It's a sort of it's technically YA fantasy, but I think it's in the sense that the characters are teenagers, but it reads like a sort of Germanic fairy tale epic fantasy in a way. But really, I think I have to actually, there is a book that is one of my author's books, which I've just been reading again for like the 6th time, just for joy, which, you know, we did the edits on it ages ago. I just keep reading it because I love it so much. And it's coming out next July, but it's called The Irresistible Urge to Fall for Your Enemy by Brigitte Knightley. It was actually, it's a hugely popular fan fiction author, Brigitte's, who wrote in the Dramini space, and she wrote an original piece of fiction, still Dramini coded, but it's a sort of entirely new separate novel to her fan fiction. And that was one I was lucky to buy at the end of last year. And I just read it constantly. I love it so much. It's slow burn, true enemies to lovers, between a sort of scholarly healer and an assassin. And it is so funny and cozy and witty and romantic. And it's buy for buy, which I think is kind of all books should be. All my books are. I think all MF pairings that I love, a bit like Emily Wilde and Wendell Bambleby, that's buy for buy. You can't tell me
We were
otherwise.
literally
No.
talking about it like 2 or 3
Yeah.
minutes ago. He has to be.
Yeah.
Right? So so I think, you know, I love all of that. And, you know, for sort of like the horror movies inside of things, obviously this is October. Well, this is October Eve, which is all of September.
It's going out in October, so it's October for everybody else.
Oh, good. Well, exactly. Right. It's October now. You know, time to watch horror movies, or horror adjacent movies if you're like, you know, a bit more nervous around them. We rewatched Constantine last night, which it's not technically a horror movie, but it's just so good. I love Tilda Swinton as Gabriel. I'm a big into that sort of like religious horror space. So yeah. I would say I don't really have any new things I'm watching right now because I'm waiting for the 3rd season of Vox Machina to come out in early October, and it comes out on my pub date, which feels very fortuitous.
It's like a little gift.
Exactly. It's a gift for me when I don't want to think about my book being read by lots of people.
Wonderful.
Amazing.
Well, thank you so much.
There we have it.
There we have it.
That was good fun.
It was. I knew I had something I wanted to mention afterwards, but I forgot it.
Darn it.
Mm.
I can't. I wish I could help, but I can't.
It is what it is.
It shouldn't be what it shouldn't be.
How dare you wipe my issues off of the table like that? Anything you'd like to say?
Oh yes, there is some things.
Oh my God.
It's October.
It is. Oh yes, it is.
We are hosting another writing event this month.
It's true.
Which is the perfect time to write something like Best Hex Ever, by the way.
It's true.
So we're hosting Camp Sword this month.
Mhm.
It's just the same as our Camp Pride and Camp Sapphic months.
Mhm.
You can set your own goal. There's no pressure. You can have as much accountability with it as you need. You know, if you need somebody to shout at you to write every day, we can do that. But also, we like to be very gentle
Mhm.
and just
So we'll
you
shout
write
at you
when
gently.
yeah, yeah. You write when you want to write.
Yes.
Um, and I guess there'll be badges again if Ivy decides to do them.
Mm-hmm. It's a good thing
Um,
you didn't put me on a spot or anything.
I don't wanna set expectations if you can't meet them. That's fine. Maybe there'll be badges, maybe they won't. Uh,
Yeah.
but there'll be writing prompts as well, so you can do those every day, and you can join us wherever you wish. We have a
Mhm.
Discord server. If you don't
Mhm.
want to talk to people, you can do it on Twitter or Instagram. And there will be some Canva graphic templates to go with your writing prompts, so it'll be fun on social media as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Will you be working on anything this camp?
I kind of want to finish editing my short story.
Mm-hmm.
So I might do it as part of the camp.
Yay.
We'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
I always say I want to work on something, but then I'm extremely exhausted because of work. So it might change
Yeah.
7 times before that.
Well, luckily it's a low pressure event. So even if you only work one day of the whole
Uh-huh.
camp,
Yeah.
I'm sure you'll get a badge for it.
Yeah, that's true.
Still
But
counts.
yeah. How about you?
Well, I have to start editing my witchy witches, which
Mhm.
I did for last camp and the camp before and the camp before because it took me like over a year to write it. But I'm obsessed with The Last of Us right now. It would be nice to get back to my zombie work in progress.
It's true. It's true.
So I'll think about it. I'll think about it. We'll see.
Yeah. We'll see
Who
what
knows
life
what
brings
next
you.
month will bring.
That's true.
That's it.
Okay. Well,
Wait, this is our next episode, isn't it?
yes.
Okay. So remember to keep up with our blog because our release list will have just gone out for October, including Best Hex Ever. And we will have some blog guests over. I think we would have had one in September.
Well, then until next time.
Support women's rights,
But most importantly, support women's wrongs.
especially if they put a hex on somebody by accident.
Yeah. It happens. It is what it is.
Exactly. So it seems like a them problem, really.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah.
Great.
Just gotta let it happen.
And we shall see you later, alligator.
In a while, crocodile. Thank you for listening to Swords and Sapphics. You can enjoy a new episode every Wednesday.
While waiting, you can visit our website, swordsandsuffix.com, and find lots of articles, interviews, and guest pieces.
Feel free to contact us with any requests, questions, or inquiries through a form on our website or directly to our email, swordsandsuffixpodcast@gmail.com.